What if your whole life you've been told to shrink, to explain, over-apologize, overfunction, underreact, to tuck your differences out of sight because they made someone else uncomfortable? That's the reality so many neurodivergent people have lived in. And shame? It's the air we breathe in those spaces. Because in a culture that uses shame as a tool of control, being different makes you a target. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist. And today we're going to talk about shame resilience, what it looks like, what it costs, why it matters, especially for autistic and ADHD folks, because we are often raised in environments that treat our needs as problems, our behavior as embarrassing, and our existence as too much. Practicing shame resilience is not the same thing as having confidence. It's not about being unbothered, untouchable, or fearless. It's about recognizing when shame shows up and choosing not to let it steer the wheel. The term shame resilience comes from the work of researcher Brené Brown. She describes shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. That right there, that's the heartbeat of so many neurodivergent lives. When Brown talks about resilience, she's not saying we should stop feeling shame altogether. She's talking about building the tools to move through it, instead of shutting down, hiding, or attacking ourselves. Her research shows that the people who are most resilient to shame had 4 things in common. They recognized shame and named it. They practiced critical awareness, asking, where is this message coming from, and is it valid? They reached out and shared their story. They talked about shame instead of staying silent. That's powerful. But here's where I want to zoom in through a neurodivergent lens. For many of us, those steps come with added friction. We've often internalized shame before we even had the language for it. We might not know how to name it because we were taught our pain was too much or our needs were made up. We may not have safe people to talk to or enough executive function in the moment to regulate through it. And that critical awareness part gets complicated when you've been gaslit by systems your whole life. So when we talk about shame resilience for autistics and ADHDers, we're not just talking about feeling your feelings. We're talking rather about unraveling years of internalized ableism, trauma, and survival strategies. Internalized ableism begins with others responding to our neurodivergence in shaming ways. We get told to be less dramatic, stop interrupting, use a normal voice, sit still, quit asking weird questions. Why are you like this? And because we're young or dependent or outnumbered, we don't have the power to challenge any of it. So we adapt, contort, and memorize which part of ourselves are unwelcome. And eventually the people who used to correct you don't need to anymore because you do it yourself. You scan rooms for irritation, you apologize before anyone complains, you try to behave better without knowing what that even means. Ableism doesn't just shape how others see you, it shapes how you see you. And over time, all that external pressure hardens into a belief that feels like identity. I'm too much. I always make things awkward. I'm bad at relationships. Everyone else seems to manage. Why can't I? These thoughts represent survival strategies that stuck around long after the danger passed. Internalized ableism is the part of you that still flinches even when no one is yelling. It's the urge to shrink even when you're alone. It's the instinct to blame yourself before you even know what happened. Shame resilience starts with noticing this inherited voice and realizing it isn't your own. But what do you do once you've noticed that voice? Once you've named the shame that never belonged to you in the first place? That's where the work begins. Because recognizing internalized ableism is only the first step. Reclaiming yourself after takes something different. It takes rebuilding trust with your own nervous system, letting yourself be visible in ways that used to feel dangerous. It takes choosing authenticity not as a performance, but as a return to your truth. But what does being authentic actually look like when you're neurodivergent? Hint, it's not about dumping your every raw thought into the world. Nor is it about never making mistakes or being endlessly brave. Rather, it's about being in relationship with yourself, honestly. And that means things like saying what you actually think, even if it's not the popular opinion. Allowing yourself to stim or fidget or move in ways that help you regulate. speaking your needs instead of overfunctioning to avoid conflict, letting yourself take up space even when the room wasn't built for you, naming your sensory limits or executive challenges without apology, owning your impact when you make a mistake, and not spiraling into self-blame. This kind of authenticity is deeply vulnerable because for many of us, being authentic was punished early and often. We were told our neurodivergence made us a problem, and so we learned to adjust who we were. We became fluent in being easy to be around, and that fluency, it often came at the cost of self-trust. Practicing authenticity now, after years and decades of that, it's going to feel awkward. You're going to feel exposed, and you may even feel selfish. It's easy to think of shame as something internal, a private feeling, a personal insecurity. But the truth is, shame is also a cultural tool, a form of social control. And once you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. It's in the way schools discipline kids who stim or speak out of turn. It's in HR policies that reward team players while punishing boundary setters. It's in online spaces that ridicule anyone who asks for accommodations. It shows up when professionalism and tone are used to punish anyone who communicates differently, asks directly, or shows emotion. In the US and in many Western cultures, shame is baked into how we enforce norms. You step outside the expected role, you get mocked, corrected, pushed out. You ask for more than the bare minimum, you're told to be grateful, to lower your standards, to stop being difficult. For minority groups, disabled folks, neurodivergents, BIPOC, queer people, this gets even harder because shame is used to keep us in our place, to stop us from speaking up, to make us doubt ourselves before we even try, to wear us down until we stop asking. And even when that shame isn't spoken aloud, you can feel it in the room. That ambient discomfort when you do something differently. The way people shift in their seats or go quiet or laugh nervously. The way your directness is labeled as rude, your honesty as inappropriate, your needs as unreasonable. It doesn't have to be explicit to be effective. That's how shame works best, when it becomes invisible punishment. This is where shame resilience becomes more than just personal healing. It becomes political, a form of rebellion. Every time we refuse to contort, refuse to be shamed out of asking for what we need, we chip away at that system. So let's get practical. What does shame resilience actually look like? It could be saying, I'm autistic or I am ADHD in a conversation where you used to stay vague because hiding isn't protecting you anymore. Going to your school's disability office to request exam breaks or deadline flexibility, even if part of you still worries you're being too much. Sending a follow-up email to clarify something you said instead of spiraling for 3 days about how you might have been misunderstood. Wearing one earplug under your beanie to cut down on noise in a work environment, even if no one else in the meeting knows or gets it. Telling your partner that you're overstimulated and can't handle cuddling tonight, then offering a different way to connect. Using a script to advocate for your needs, because scripting helps us stay regulated, and that's not a failure. Taking accountability for your impact without collapsing into self-hatred, or letting someone else use your vulnerability against you. It's also knowing when to protect your energy. You don't have to educate every person who dismisses your diagnosis. You don't have to keep explaining your needs to someone who only wants to argue. You don't have to accept shame just because it's being offered politely. Shame resilience is about being firm in your self-knowledge while staying open to repair, reflection, and growth. It's about setting boundaries, and not just with other people, but with your own inner critic, the one that says, you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you should have handled that better. Sometimes you have to set a boundary with that voice too, and say, no, I get to take up space, I get to need what I need, I'm allowed to exist as I am. Let's talk about accommodations, because this is where shame loves to hide. A lot of us have been taught directly or indirectly that accommodations are for people who are really disabled or who really need it. That asking for them means you're being difficult, fragile, or unfair. That needing support means you don't belong in that space to begin with. All of that, that's internalized ableism talking. That's the voice of shame dressed up in reasonable expectations. Here's the truth. Accommodations are not favors. They're how we make inaccessible systems survivable and maybe someday livable. If you're an ADHDer who needs written follow-ups after meetings to process, that's an accommodation. If you're autistic and can only tolerate grocery shopping early in the morning to avoid sensory overload, that's an accommodation. If you wear headphones at work or stim under the table or use a scheduling app to avoid executive collapse, you're already accommodating yourself. So let's stop pretending we're not. Let's stop asking permission to survive. You're allowed to support your body and your brain, even if someone else finds it confusing or inconvenient. Even if you've learned to do it quietly so no one notices. Even if it's not formal or approved or written down. Because the goal of accommodations is to reduce harm so you have a shot at actually showing up fully. You don't need to justify that. You just need to claim it. Shame resilience isn't easy, especially for neurodivergent people. It takes executive labor to even name what we need and emotional labor to express it, especially when every past attempt was ignored, misunderstood, or punished. Sometimes the hardest part isn't advocating externally, but pushing through internal resistance. The voice of your tyrannical inner critic that says, "Don't bother, they're not going to listen. You're going to sound ridiculous. You're too much. You make things awkward. They'll be mad. It's safer to just deal with it quietly." That voice didn't come from nowhere. It was built slowly over time through ableist messages, through trauma, through the repetition of being misunderstood. When you've been repeatedly silenced by schools, workplaces, families, peers, you start to do it yourself just to stay ahead of the hurt. You preempt the rejection by staying small. You cushion your needs so no one feels burdened. You delay the ask so long you burn out in the waiting. And there are some people with a vested interest in keeping you here by actively trying to shame you back into silence. Your difference threatens their control. They might call you selfish or too needy or unreasonable. They might escalate when you hold a boundary because now they can't manipulate you the same way. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their shame is not yours to carry. Return to sender. You're not here to make everyone else comfortable at the cost of your own humanity. Setting boundaries sometimes will come with backlash. Not always, but often enough that it's worth preparing for. Because when you stop shrinking, some people will take it personally. When you stop overfunctioning, someone's going to feel abandoned. And when you start advocating, someone's going to say, "You've changed." And they won't mean it as a compliment. You might lose relationships that only worked because you masked. You might get pushback from colleagues who benefited from your burnout. You might hear, "It's not that hard. You used to be fine. Why are you making everything about you?" You are not making it about you. You are finally including yourself in the equation. The discomfort they feel is what it looks like when the power dynamics shift. Some people will shame you harder once you stop shaming yourself, because now they can't control you the same way. Now you're not bending before they even ask. And again, just let them be uncomfortable. Sometimes the hardest part of self-advocacy isn't knowing what you need. It's knowing how to say it. So here are some scripts and starters, phrases you can adapt, borrow, or build from for moments when shame tries to steal your voice. When you're setting a boundary, "I'm not available for blame, but I'm open to repair. That doesn't work for me. Here's what does. This isn't up for discussion." When you're naming a need, "I need more time to process that. Can we switch to text? I communicate better in writing. My brain works differently. I need X to do this well." When someone reacts badly to your difference, that reaction isn't mine to manage. You don't have to get it, but I do need you to respect it. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm stating what I need. When you feel the inner critic trying to spiral, "I'm not doing something wrong. I'm doing something new. I don't owe comfort to people who benefit from my silence. I don't need to earn ease. I need to allow it." Scripts don't make things easy, but they do give you something to hold onto when your nervous system is in defense mode. You don't have to make it sound perfect. You just have to stay with yourself. Even one line is enough. Shame thrives in isolation, but shame can't survive community. Every time you name your need, every time you stop apologizing for just existing, every time you take a breath instead of descending into self-blame, you're doing it for yourself and you're making it easier for someone else to do it too. That's how culture shifts. One person stims without hiding it, and someone else sees it and lets their guard down. One person says, "I'm not masking anymore," and others start wondering if they could unmask too. When neurodivergent folks speak up, we're not speaking just for ourselves, but for a wider community that has gone historically unaccommodated for. We're advocating for the change we need, not just to survive, but to truly flourish. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from my content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.